It's that time again.
Evidence prompts New Mexico officials to re-examine the case. Millennials are leaving California, but which state is the top relocation choice? Those stories and more coming up on NTD Tonight.
Did you know African elephants could become
He was found guilty of brandishing a department-issued weapon. Caleb Rogers, 35, who has been in unpaid suspension and isolation for nearly 20 months since his arrest, expressed remorse before the sentencing. Rogers had brandished the weapon during his February 2022 arrest following the final heist and a brief altercation with casino security personnel near the Las Vegas Strip. U.S. District Judge Andrew Gordon recognized Rogers' gambling addiction and financial difficulties and imposed a sentence less than the potential maximum of 22 years. The judge also mandated an additional 3 years of supervised release after prison and ordered Rogers to pay $85,310 in restitution to the casinos. At the time of the robberies, Rogers served as a patrol officer, and he was found guilty of all 3 heists by a jury in July. Christina Corona, NTD News, Nevada.
David, so a manhunt is underway in Georgia in Bibb County, which is a county about 85 miles south of Atlanta. What happened is early Monday morning, 4 inmates were able to escape through a window in a day room and then through a hole in a fence out to a Dodge Charger, which was waiting for them, and then they were able to get away in the vehicle. The sheriff held a press conference yesterday about the incident. He said that he thinks the driver of the Dodge Charger was involved in creating the hole, or at least putting some items through the fence. Looking at some surveillance video, they were able to verify this. And then they think that the individuals were able to use some of the items that were put through the fence to escape. They still haven't 100% confirmed this. They are still investigating things, but they are looking for help and want to get these individuals detained again.
Did the sheriff indicate how this was able to happen?
He didn't point specifically to anything. He did highlight that their first priority right now is to catch the individuals and put them back, into custody. But he did mention that the jail is worn down. It needs to be, updated and renovated. The room, the area where the detainees were able to escape from, actually, he said, is the most rundown part of the jail that needs to be, updated and fixed. He also said something about staffing issues the facility has been having. They've been having trouble keeping enough staff. And for example, on the night of the escape, only 10 people were actually on duty at the facility, which houses over 800 inmates.
Any idea where the fugitives might be now?
The sheriff said that they don't have any solid leads right now to find these individuals. He said there was no indication that they knew each other before they got into jail, so they could be, together still. They could be separate, gone their own ways. They're not quite sure at this time. As I mentioned, they are working with several different agencies to try to track them down. He also said that they're looking for tips from the public. They are offering a $1,000 reward for any information that leads to their arrest, and people can call Crime Stoppers at 1-887-68-CRIME.
All right, Jason.
Honored to be here. Well, so I want to talk about something specific, a report that you wrote in 1997, a long, long time ago, called Sidewinder. Sidewinder got a lot of flack. It was, I think nobody wanted to see your report, but basically you had a very acute awareness of a significant level of Chinese Communist Party infiltration within Canada, and you documented that. And also this unholy trinity, which I'm going to get you to explain to me what that is in a moment. Let's start there. What did you find out in 1997?
I became in charge of Asia Pacific in the mid-90s, and at that period of time, it was prior to Hong Kong returning to China, mainland China. There was a lot of preoccupation because we witnessed a lot of Hong Konger coming to Canada. Hong Kong was our second biggest trade partner after the U.S. So Hong Kong was very, very important for us, and that's why it facilitated. But a lot of Chinese Hong Kong people wanted to come to Canada, get the citizenship, just in case something went wrong after the return of Hong Kong to mainland China. But it opened the door also to the triads, and a lot of triads started to come in also. And we were preoccupied about how easily they could enter and get a Canadian citizenship and establish themselves within the community. So that's why we started to study. But then started to appear also on the radar some very, very, very rich Hong Kongers, also like Li Ka-shing, or people from Macau like Stanley Ho, who were billionaires and would literally invest a lot of money in Canada, buying some business, buying some influence this way. And I'm talking like huge of influence and huge amount of business without necessarily being Canadian themselves. With that, we could notice as well the influence they gain on the local authorities, being municipal, provincial, which is the equivalent of the states here, or the federal level, because of that amount of money, the kind of influence and clout they had with their business. And ultimately, we were preoccupied also to see how much the Chinese intelligence service were starting to be quite active in our political scene as well. And we discovered through records of Election Canada some donation that was done by the Chinese embassy to both political parties. And the Election Canada had to report publicly those donations. So we found it. And at that time, they were clumsy. Frankly, the Chinese were very clumsy because it was reported that they had given money to both the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party, which were at that time the most prominent political parties in Canada.
It happens here too.
And that preoccupied us. But the further we were in looking into this situation, we started to see a link between the Chinese intelligence service, the rich tycoon coming from Hong Kong, and the triads, and a collaboration between those three elements, which eventually were called the unholy trinity. These people were collaborating with one another. That was reinforced by the revelation received from a Chinese defector, that there was a Chinese intelligence officer in 1992 that defected to the Australian, our counterpart. And at that time, the report was classified, but we had access to that information at CSIS, and which is the Canadian Security Intelligence Service that we call CSIS. And he told us, or told the Australian, that in 1984, he was sent to Hong Kong under the cover of being a journalist in order to be capable to approach the triads leaders and to invite the triad leaders to collaborate with Beijing to make sure that in 1997, when the repatriation would take place, that there is a smooth transition. And if they help in keeping things quiet, they could continue to do their business as usual. They won't be bothered as much as they stay outside of mainland China. They could do whatever they want and continue to do their business, but they needed to make sure that everything was quiet, which eventually Deng Xiaoping referred to them as patriotic triads, because they did accept the deal, except one. And within a month, he was gone, was dead. So the triads at that time was clearly collaborating with the Chinese intelligence services. And we saw, of course, the rich tycoon very close to power, and particularly Mr. Li Ka-shing, who was very close to Deng Xiaoping. And Deng Xiaoping, and we know exactly the date and the place where there was a meeting, and where Deng Xiaoping asked Mr. Li Ka-shing to help them boost their economy. At that time, Mr. Deng Xiaoping sort of just took power after the death of Mao Zedong, and it continued to help building the economic power that China eventually will become.
What was the reaction to you writing the Sidewinder report?
a lot of skepticism, a lot of resistance. When we submitted our report to our masters and our boss, they immediately wanted to shut it down. Why they wanted to do that? Is it because somebody said, oh, this is not going to be good for my own career? Or simply because they couldn't believe what we had found, despite the fact that we brought evidence to every single line of the report. We produced a binder showing the evidence that we had collected, either confidential reports, source reports, or even open source report. Everything was backed up, every single line. But despite that, they didn't want to hear about it, and it disappears. What is interesting is in the process of our research, we wanted to understand exactly what was going on and see if it was happening somewhere else. So we went to our American counterpart and we started to share with them our preoccupation, our hypothesis, and the observation that we were making in our own society. Like, for example, having Chinese company coming to buy Canadian companies just to get the Canadian flag on the loan, but they didn't have to spy anymore. Buying a Canadian companies gave them access to the intellectual property, gave us access to influence also the local authority, gave them access as well to the profit. So the money was going back to China. They were leaving just a strict minimum to keep the business going. But at the same time, the amount of influence they gained on the political scene was tremendous and very, very, very efficient. Well, our counterpart agreed with us in the FBI and the U.S. Secret Service. They understood and they agree with us, mainly the FBI with who we were collaborating, and they saw exactly the same phenomenon. What we discovered later is that they would go a little bit further, inspiring themselves from our own observations and starting to verify it on their own what was happening in the U.S. and realizing that it has also some effect or implication right here in the U.S. and eventually confirm what was happening in Canada. And
Well, I know who's putting these signs out.